And today's session is building connections, making a difference, one lesson at a time. And we'll go ahead and let our presenters take over.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am going to try to share my screen here. I had a little technical problem here right at the very last minute. As always, that's what happens. I am going to share screen 2 and start here from the beginning. See my co-presenters, they don't even know that I'm over here in a nightmare. My PowerPoint presentation is not working. I do not know what's going on. Don't you love it? Yes, lovely. This is going to work. Can y'all see it fine? Except y'all aren't seeing from the beginning. It is not working. Okay, we're going to start over. There we go. Now, okay. Hello, everyone. I promise you this is going to get better. We would like to welcome you to Building Connections, Making a Difference, One Lesson at a Time. We are the New Mexico State University Online Quality Assurance Team. I am Sherrell Wheeler, and I am the Director of Online Quality Assurance and a Professor of Business and Education. And I'm going to let my colleagues introduce themselves. Karen?
I'm Karen May, and I am also business and office technology at New Mexico State at Alamogordo, although I live in Waco, Texas. I've been teaching 47 years, and since 2000 online, and since 2014 solely online. I've had 21 courses that have been reviewed, and I've led about 100 reviews. So I love Quality Matters, and I love teaching the APP QMR workshops, and welcome. We're happy you're here.
Christine?
Hi, I'm Christine Trapp. I'm a professor of nutrition, personal health and wellness, and chemistry at New Mexico State University, Alamogordo. I am a member of Sherrell's Online Quality Assurance team. This is my second time on the team. I was also on her original team when we started it. What was it, Sherrell, 10 years ago? Something like that. And I've led about 41 reviews. I'm also a master reviewer, and 9 of my courses are have met Quality Matters standards.
And Kim?
Hi, everybody. I'm Kim Lopez Gallagher, and I teach philosophy, government, and U.S. history here at NMSU Alamogordo. I'm also part of Sherrell's QA team. I have taught online since 2003. I have served on 33 reviews. We just counted yesterday, and I've had 10 courses meet QM standards.
So today, we hope after you leave the session, you will be able to explain specific activities that provide connections from content to real-life situations, discuss activities that connect and engage learners to content, other learners and instructors, and identify activities that provide relevant connections. We will focus on specific review standards 3.1, 4.1, 5.1, and 6.1. Those will be our main focus. Instructional materials are critical, and as such is an essential specific review standard 4.1. One of the most important instructional materials, and one that is often not considered, is you, the instructor. It is important to remember that you are the expert in your class, and don't forget that. You should be providing instruction. That means instructional videos showing the students that you know the subject and that you are the expert. How can our students respect us as the experts in grading and giving feedback when we're not showing them that we are the experts? So many times we sometimes forget, and as we were putting together this presentation, I was like, wait a minute, we've forgotten to put ourselves, the instructors, in here as that critical instructional material. So I just wanted to really stress that. We do that in our face-to-face classes. We are that main instructional material. So make sure that you don't forget that. And we wanted to point that out in this little presentation. Of course, you also need some other experts. Don't just rely on a textbook. Students don't read, and we're going to have to just get used to that. I think Michelle helped point that out this morning in the opening session, that we're going to have to look at other ways to engage our students. And so we hope that we can give you some ideas today. We have to entice them. We have to look at students as individuals, and we have to find ways to help them learn the information that we need to present to them. We need to make our learning materials engaging. So we're going to share some ways to do that. You want your instructional materials that we're going to provide to our learners to relate to them. Let the learners know that you know who they are. There are a number of ways that you can do that. First is by having a variety of options for them. They don't all learn the same way. Some of them, as I've stated, don't learn through reading. So have a lot of options for them. This younger generation, they're digital natives, and they are going to have to be stimulated. You can't just, like in the days when I went to college, say, read the textbook and here's the test. You can't do that anymore. If you want them to learn, you're going to have to help them. You're going to have to be creative. So we hope we're going to be able to give you some of that.
Okay, another instructional material, and please excuse my voice. I don't normally talk like this, but I have had a situation where they injured my throat. So, but publisher materials can help us engage learners. We don't want to use them to teach the class solely, because they cannot do that. You have to be there as well. If you've used publisher materials, you probably already realize that the feedback they give them is not good enough. In my field, I know especially, they don't tell them how to do it right, or what they just tell them what was wrong, but they don't tell them how to fix that. So some ebooks, though, give animations and embedded videos directly in the content. This really is engaging for the students. It's not a bunch of reading at once, but they read, they check for understanding, and that all gets done right there in the publisher material. So they get immediate feedback. I have a program in computer science that shows them how to do the task in a video. Then it allows them to follow along and work with the video. And then it has them apply it for a grade. It is a great training tool for the tasks. And then it does the projects and it grades them for the projects, but it does not give them enough feedback. I still have to go in and give them video feedback on how to do it right, so that when they get to the summative part of that project, then they can do it correctly. And they've had feedback so that they can. Sherrell, I guess.
I think it's me,
I'm
isn't it?
sorry.
Yeah, sorry, folks.
me.
I didn't
I
mean to
messed
fall
up,
asleep at the
sorry.
wheel there. Okay, so I'm going to talk about, I also use some publisher materials, mainly in my American National Government class. So in American National Government, I use W.W. Norton. I use one of their textbooks, and they have some really wonderful resources and materials to offer. And what's really nice about it is that you don't necessarily have to import the entire package, but you can pick and choose particular materials to build into the course that you design, which I really like that. So what I mostly use for that class are simulations. And so these simulations allow the students to imagine themselves in the roles of legislators, diplomats, and even presidents. It usually takes them through a series of a scenario and then a series of decisions that they have to make, leading them to a conclusion to that scenario based on the decisions that they choose in the simulation. So I really I like this because it lets students really look at how the concepts work in real life. They bring them to life from just being, text in a book, and it shows them, the students, real world applications of some very abstract concepts.
I probably use the most publisher resources of the group here. I have publisher platforms for 3 of my classes. I use McGraw-Hill Connect for 2 of them for my nutrition and health and wellness. And what I really like about it, there's several things, but the first thing is the smart book that they have. So it basically creates mini cycles of questions that only contain about 5 concepts. They create lots of different questions, chunking it for the students. And once the student understands the concept, then those related questions will disappear. And if they aren't getting it, they'll continue to get more questions around that chunk of information until the program feels that they've mastered those concepts, those 5 concepts. Also, making my regular assignments with Connect is nice because the tools are there. So I can take everything that we've been doing in lecture and in their readings, and then the assignments are all application based, and they have the tools there, like the diet analysis programs that are typically pretty expensive if you were to buy them. I also use Pearson for chemistry, mastering chemistry. There's a lot of mastering. There's mastering biology, mastering chemistry. There's probably mastering physics. And this, unlike what Karen said, and the one that she uses, it does tell the student as they're going through what they did wrong. And it will continue to prompt them. It'll see what they did. It'll say, look at this instead of that. And it will help guide the students through the assignment, which I really, really like. Now, I don't know a lot of the math programs, but a lot of our math faculty use programs. I don't know if they use Cengage. There are some engineering people use MATLAB. I'm not sure if that's really a publisher material, but it's a similar kind of thing. But yeah, I use publisher materials a lot. One of the things I have had to learn, though, is I need to take the feedback that I give in the publisher platform and put that feedback in our LMS, because it's really important that students get all of their stuff in the LMS.
One instructional learning activity that I use a lot is reality TV. I'm not sure how much reality there really is, but it's more real to our students than a textbook is. And there are concepts that they can learn. Since I teach business, there are a number of them that apply to my class. I use Undercover Boss to teach leadership styles and motivational theories. I use Shark Tank to teach financial concepts and business plans. You can consider using Project Runway to teach perseverance along with time management, teamwork, and budgeting. Hotel Impossible to teach revenue management, hotel operations, and branding. The Profit to teach management concepts. The Amazing Race can help in teaching students to embrace different customs from different parts of the world. That one could be used for a lot of different geography and that type of thing. The show, What Would You Do? Let students look at ethics and moral values, which could be used in education and psychology and those types of areas. Based on the episode, you could teach ethical dilemmas or ethical-based concepts. Intervention looks at the reality of substance abuse and the impact it has on the people suffering from the abuse and others in their lives. And even when you have to look at, some of these aren't even current, but you can look at old versions of the shows. And I bring them not only in as instructional materials, but in learning activities and also into my assessment questions. So I find them extremely helpful in my business classes.
One of my favorite instructional materials is to use debates. And one of my favorite sites is Intelligence Squared Debates. I use the debate. The specific one that I use regularly is the vegetarian diet versus the omnivorous diet. And I use that in my nutrition class. And what I really like about this platform, this Intelligence Squared Debates, is that it has credible, intelligent people on both sides of the issue. And I think that that's really, really important. It highlights different perspectives to students. It encourages open-mindedness. It encourages courteous debate on complex issues, which I think is really important for students to develop. And this resource is a great example. They have, you can see here, they have so many different areas. They have culture, they have economics, finance, education, energy, environment, law, health, politics, religion, science, sports, tech. Any subject you're in, you can probably find a debate that your students could listen to. I have them do this in the discussion, and I have them choose a side after listening to the debate, and then they have to make a persuasive paper, using reliable resources. They do have to use citations as well. And I have to tell you, I get a lot of positive feedback on this activity. They just completed it in my class just this last week. And I got several compliments from students. Oh, I'm so glad you had us do that. That is so interesting. I never thought about it this way, because they would hear things about the issue that they've never heard before, because usually you're listening to just what you want to hear. You're listening to the facts that support what you already believe. And when you're listening to the Intelligence Squared Debates, you're hearing intelligent opinions on the other side, and you're having to listen to it. Sometimes what I'll do is ask them to argue the point of view they disagree with too, which I think helps. Kim, you have some of, you use these as well, correct?
Yes, I do. I really, I love Intelligence Squared also. And so the areas I tend to gravitate to are law and politics. So I use a debate on presidential power from Intelligence Squared in, again, my American National Government class. So the students watch the debate as though they are members of the audience, and then they discuss the points of view that they see. and I have them, keep track of the points of view that they see on both sides, which is important, so that they can learn how to articulate, arguments on both sides of an argument. The students really enjoy watching the debate, and it's a video, so it's easy for them to watch online, but it really allows them to process and discuss the complexities, in this case, the one that I use, of of constitutional limits of the power of the presidency. So yeah, I agree with Christine. This is a really good resource, and I think, as you can see from the slide, there are many different areas that are included where you'll find debates, and it's kind of it provides a safe space where students can consider a topic that might be controversial and talk about it, and learn how to have civil discourse, which is an important goal, at least for me, in my classes.
So some other free resources that we've all used. I've used OpenStax textbooks, and they are peer reviewed and openly licensed. They're 100% free. I was amazed at what was available. I think when we can use open source textbooks, we're telling our students that we understand that the cost of education is hard for them, and we can better connect with our students because they feel like we understand them. And I know I'm going back to what Michelle said this morning, but I thought she did an excellent presentation this morning. And I think our students feel like we understand them, that we're connecting with them when we can do things like this, when they can feel that we feel their pain in understanding that when we can and we do provide something like a free textbook from OpenStax, I think that we relate better to them. I know that it's not always possible to find an appropriate textbook and to use open source texting. Absolutely, I understand that. I use open source material in my education course, but I use publisher-based materials in my business course. So you can't always use it. So Christine, you want to share some?
Yeah, sometimes I like to use TED Talks from an expert in the field that we're going over. And I find that the TED Talk helps to hook the student, because the TED Talks are people from real life and they're not just the textbook. They're often entertaining, they're often funny, and it's that hook that we need to get them interested. I also use a lot of government publications. In fact, one of my courses, my dietary guidelines class, uses the dietary guidelines publication as a primary resource. Now, that can be problematic sometimes because, for instance, with the dietary guidelines, new ones come out every 5 years. And so I have to redesign the course every 5 years, regardless. It's not static, it changes all the time. I also use things, I use Harvard Public Health website, has a lot of great material that I direct students to read. And one of the reasons that I try to use as many free resources on the internet is because after they leave school, especially in the area of health, they're not going to go find their textbook to look up the question. They're going to Google their question. And I want to teach them how to find reliable resources about their health and wellness, because let's face it, there's a lot of crap information out there. So I feel that one of my jobs is to teach them to navigate the internet to find reliable sources of information. So using these free sources is very important if we can teach them that.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Khan Academy and YouTube. I do use some videos from Khan Academy, and they are actually included with the publisher materials that I get from W.W. Norton. I really like the Khan Academy videos for government because they're short and they're concise explanations of the topics that we are studying. They also include, I think, nice illustrations. Like, for example, in addition to defining a term, they'll show a video of an example of this happening, say, in Congress. So, you know, a meeting of a committee doing oversight over a federal agency, for example. So it, again, bringing those concepts to life for students is really helpful. And as YouTube, you know, we're all familiar with YouTube, right? I mean, that's been around for so long, and it's just such a huge repository of all kinds of videos, academic and not academic. So in order to navigate all of that, because sometimes, you know, if I just go to YouTube and start putting in terms, it's a little overwhelming. I look for channels that produce videos relevant for my discipline. So you can do the same. You can look for those channels that are more closely tied into your particular discipline. So, for example, I really like PBS Crash Course, and they have, some of you might be familiar with Crash Course. They have a number of topics that they cover. They have a very good series on government as well as U.S. history. And so that's a channel that I tune into often and use that resource for my students. And they're humorous and, again, just brings the subject matter to life, which I think is really important.
Okay, and I just wanted to mention, I believe it was Diana that mentioned UT Dana Center as also a place where you can get, if you're not watching the chat, that was a good resource that she mentioned. I'm going to talk a little bit about Canvas Commons. I use Canvas Commons. It's constantly growing with assignments and modules. I have put some of my own in there. I use an APA module that I import from there, so the whole module, and then I've just tweaked it for my use. I've had a number of reviewers that have reviewed my courses that have mentioned that and have asked me where I got it. Of course, I had the citation there, but they wanted the exact place where they could find it. And it's pretty easy to search to find what you're looking for. And if you don't find it, just search again using different terms. I have also found assignments for business that I've used. I do find, and someone mentioned this in one of the pre-conferences that I attended, that you do need to tweak them sometimes. You can take bits and pieces from others, rubrics, etc., assignments, projects, and then make it your own, and then just cite the source of where you got it from. But it's a great place to go and find free help with assignments and modules, etc.
We have put all of our suggestions in a Google Doc and want to share that with you. I have already posted that in the chat. I'll do that again. So there's a link there to our Google Doc. If you will, that was the problem I was having earlier. Oh, good, it opened this time. So let me bring that over. Can y'all see that? It has all of our, the information that we provided. So it has all the links to Intelligence Squared debates, the OpenStax, the Khan Academy, everything's there. And then some of you have added some. If you will just go there and put your suggestions there, then we'll all have all the suggestions here and all have access to this Google Doc. That would just be amazing. And we can all utilize this document later. I know I always come home from every conference, especially the QM conference, with some great sources that I can utilize. So if y'all will just put all of your little tips in there, we would love it. And we have added ours in there. So I'm going to move that out of the way and try to get it completely out of the way so I can get back. You know, when you things go away, when you get too many things open. Okay, so we'll continue on. Next, we want to take a look at learning activities. And of course, learning activities is another critical component of any course design. And it is specific review standard 5.1. All instructional materials we talked about are learning activities. And as students use those for instruction, when they are engaging, they become strong learning activities. And as we talked about the instructional materials that we use, you notice that we then moved on to how we use them as learning activities, because as we use them for instruction, they then float right into how we then put them into some type of learning activity that we then assess. So we're going to go on and cover some different types of learning activities. So Karen? You're muted, Karen.
Let me unmute myself. Okay, so mine is on creative activities. I've tried to come up with some things that are beyond the worksheet. I mean, there are places to use worksheets for students to get a kind of direction, but it's also helpful to allow them to be creative. We have a lot of students in our classes who work better, think better if they're allowed to have a little creativity. So I've reviewed a number of courses that use infographics. And you would be surprised how many of our students actually know how to use infographics, that they don't need to be taught, or even a very short teach session on creating one. They can go to Canva and create them for free. They also can cost, but you can show them how to do them for free if you're in a school environment. And it gives them that opportunity to be creative. Journalism classes teach them how to do infographics as part of disseminating news. I teach a whole unit on infographics and desktop publishing, but you can take any concept and have them show you what they have learned through an infographic by creating and being a little creative. Then I also have had contests where I've had them do the best image, and I've gotten my community or my advisory board involved in judging those. Best flyers for my teachers organization. I have done for several years, I did the brochure. I let the students in my desktop publishing class each go to the website, decide what information needed to be on a brochure, and then the best brochure we used at the summer conference with their name on it. So that we passed out to our teachers all over the state of Texas. So those kinds of things give them ability to show off their skills, and they feel like they've really done something.
Mary in the chat said if you're using a lot of infographics, consider using the Copyfish Chrome extension to pull text from visuals, infographics, so you can provide a transcript, alternative written description for learners. Thank you, Mary. That's a great
good information.
Yeah, and she put the link there as well.
Thank you, Mary.
So I was going to talk about case studies. I use case studies a fair amount. It's one of my favorite ways of taking learning into the real world. For example, the one I'm using a lot right now is one I use for my chemistry students. My chemistry students are typically pre-nursing students. So one of my labs is a case study that highlights the importance of accurate calculations and the knowledge of basic chemistry. It's based on a real case study where a young child died because they were given the wrong dosage, and it had to do with bad math and not knowing chemistry. I use a great resource called the National Center for Case Study Teaching and Science. It's from the University of Buffalo, and it gives you, I think they said 788 different cases. You have access to the cases for free, but for $25 a year, you also get the keys and teaching resources for the case study. So that's a pretty minor amount to have all that extra material. And they have lots and lots of case studies. It used to be, before I discovered this site, I was making up my own case studies, which I still do in nutrition, since that's my main field. But for chemistry, I was at a loss, but I was trying to come up with labs that they could do. And that's when I found this resource, which I just love. So it's the National Center for Case Study Teaching and Science. And as soon as I turn this over to Karen to talk about some case studies, I will put oh, Sherrell just said the link is in the Google Doc. Okay, great. So I will still put it here just in case it's not there. So Karen, you have some case study. You also do some case studies, correct?
I do. I use quite a few case studies in the classroom where they're actually making critical decisions about the case. But then I also use the concept videos that are different cases about businesses that have been successful in certain areas. Harley-Davidson is a good example that they were used in one of the courses I recently designed. A couple of different videos about their leadership and how it's kind of world-renowned, their style, and how they have talked about it and actually taught that to our students. I recently did a human relations course where I was designing one on self-esteem, and I ran across a TEDx of J.K. Rowling telling her story, who apparently she did not have much self-esteem, self-confidence when she started. And it's really a compelling story for students to hear because many of them may be feeling the same way. So if you haven't listened to it before, I thought it was really pretty good. We do now have a number of different video editing softwares that allow us to create a video with questions so that you can give them a grade. Most of those from my publisher in Cengage are giving them a grade. They ask them some questions at the end so that they get a grade for watching the video. But most of us are not using software that are video editing software that doesn't allow for us to insert questions in there so that we can get their feedback on what they've seen in their videos. I also have students do personal interviews of people that work in the field and cite those interviews. And that has really worked out really well for them to share those as a discussion on some of the concepts that we use. We don't want to forget that we have a community of people that work in these fields in science and in politics and all of the fields that we're in that they can interview and learn from.
Karen, I also do something like that. I have my students in my health and wellness class, they have to interview an elderly person, either that they know or is in the community, and they have to do a mini nutritional assessment on them. And then they have a series of questions to ask and to write up the case on. And I've actually had some students discover that their grandmother is at nutritional risk and maybe they need to bring some resources in and get meals delivered and stuff. So it really does more than just the case study sometimes. It ends up helping them in that moment.
Well, this sort of fits, but it's kind of funny, but I struggled with teaching keyboarding online, and I've taught keyboarding for many years, but I finally, about teaching them technique, mostly grading them on technique, who's really watching them type. And I started having them graded by a family member, a neighbor. They have to submit the persons. And I thought, oh, they're going to all get hundreds, but that was not the case. It wasn't the case at all. They were pretty hard on them, and they really gave them good feedback. So that worked out really well. That's kind of fits in there, but not exactly, but it was a fun story. Am I next again?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I have started, I have my favorite quote there: tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. And so I do try to involve the students as much as possible in most of the activities. But a few years ago, I went to a conference where one of the presenters was talking about having students present their projects. She mentioned that they remembered what they learned and reflected on it more. So she had started having them present all of their projects. And it wasn't long after that that my daughter lost her job and decided it was a good time for a career change. And so I experienced her searching for jobs. And I hadn't experienced that in a while. So that was really a learning experience for me and something to take back to the classroom. And what I found was she had her first interview, and she's wound up with Western Governors, but her first interview was going to be a phone interview, but they called her 30 minutes ahead of time and said, could we do a video chat instead? So she needed to be prepared, feel like she could confidently set up a video, use a webcam, which most of our students can, you'd be surprised. So I started using that because I thought I need to prepare them. That's how they're going to present themselves, because 3 out of 4 of her interviews during that whole process of getting that job were video. And so I really learned from her about how important it is to present yourself. So what I've done is some of the assignments that were worksheets, I have put the questions on PowerPoint. And the first time I have them just use the notes pane to put their answers there. And then the next time, so I kind of baby them into it, but then the next time I have them present it to me, and I feel a connection to the students better. They're not just a name on paper, but they're an actual face and personality. And I think that's how they feel about me when I show myself on the video as well. So that's always important. You know, I've always had my picture up there, and I was in Sam's a long time ago, and this girl came running across Sam's and said, oh, you're my online teacher. She recognized me from the pictures. So we are real people, and we need to show them that, and we need to get them to get to know them as well. But it also has that really important feature of getting them to learn how to get a job, because they're going to all end up having to do it that way.
Okay, so we want to ask you again, as you have learning activities, if you would please just post them. We're running out of time, so I'm going to speed this up, everybody, ladies. We're going to speed up very quickly. We're halfway through our slides, and we have about 5 minutes. So, assessments directly measure the learning objectives. This is specific review standard 3.1. Assessment considerations. There are some important things to consider about assessments. Many times people think they have to be an exam. This is not true, especially informative assessment. When planning your assessments, try to make them relative to your learners. Think about their interests. Think about the makeup of your class. When I use names and examples in my assessments and case studies, I try to make sure I am sensitive to the diversity of the students I will be teaching. I know we probably have some K through 12 instructors in here. When I taught high school, I always use the names of the students in my classes, in my problems. They love seeing their own names in the exercises. Consider making assessments project-based, simulation-based, or task-based. Think out of the box instead of a typical question on my exams. A lot of times I use those reality TV shows. Play a snippet of the episode and then use those as my question based. They really like that instead of just a regular old question. Kim, about discussions.
Yeah, so discussions are such an ubiquitous tool in online classes, but how they are used can make the difference between having an engaging class and not having an engaging class. I like to use discussions as a platform for debating issues, sharing creative interpretations of philosophical text, and even making campaign posters. So one of my favorite activities is in my recent American history class, where students make campaign posters for a candidate running in the presidential election of 1912. And if you remember well, no one here probably remembers that election, but if you know that history, there were 4 candidates who ran who actually were fairly serious contenders. But anyway, the students upload those posters that they create, and they can do just about anything. They can do PowerPoint, they can hand draw, as long as I can open the file and read it and everyone else can, they upload that to the discussion. And then they talk to each other about what they've created and about the candidates and their platforms. And they seem to really enjoy, having a creative outlet to help them to think about the different policy positions that those candidates had. I think we're going to go on to group projects with Sherrell.
My students complete the dreaded scary music group project. They gain so much from completing these group projects, no matter their discipline. It gives them real world experiences, collaborative skills, leadership skills, communication skills that improve their socialization skills. They learn all these soft skills that employers tell us college graduates are lacking. Yes, they're a pain for students and for us as instructors, but they are so important. If you want to learn more about it, I have a session at 11:10 ET tomorrow morning. A little bit of advertisement there. Karen, we have about 2 minutes and you're muted. Fast, 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 fast.
I do journals 3 times during the semester. I have found that I get more information than from an evaluation at the end, so that I can make changes, add things to the course as needed. I've had some really good suggestions on things that they wanted to hear about, where I can make a quick video and maybe a series of videos in order to add to the course. So it does allow me to make connections with struggling students, and I'm surprised how honest they are in the journal, just one-on-one with me. So those are really, really helpful.
So sometimes we still have to do that old-fashioned dreaded memorization type of exam. There's some content-based courses, especially at the freshman, sophomore level, that require memorization of large chunks of information. Let's face it, when you go to the doctor, you want them to know where your femur is and where it's located, not just, wax eloquently about it. So they need to master this information to go on to the next course. But it's important that there be integrity for this kind of testing, whether you use something like ProctorU, Respondus Monitor, or requiring face-to-face exams with proctors. It may seem onerous, but licensing exams will be even stricter. So it is a benefit to the student that we make sure that they know this information and are prepared for this kind of testing.
So, feedback is just critical. Students need feedback. They need that connection. There are lots of different ways for feedback. We have some information in our Google Doc. If you have any questions, comments, Here's our contact information. Thank you so much for coming to our session. And I know that our time is over.
You are so right. If you want to capture that contact information, you might want to take a screenshot or a photo with your camera, because I am going to have to shut this down pretty quickly. I have another presentation in just 10 minutes. So thank you all so much for that great presentation. We appreciate you sharing your time and your experience with the other attendees. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.